Hello, everyone. We are rolling for another episode of the JJF1 podcast, where Jonah and Jordan talk about all things related to F1. Today, we're going to talk about the 2021 Styrian Grand Prix, where Max Verstappen won from Lewis Hamilton 40 something seconds behind, and Valtteri Bottas in his normal position of third place. So, Jordan, how do you feel about this race? How do you think that it went? In terms of the races that we've had this year so far, we've been really spoiled. So I think this is a little bit of a return back to normal. That's the way that I see it. I want to see how you see it.
Yeah, no, I agree. I think we are very spoiled this year where we have races like France and Spain where tire strategy was a big factor. We had races like Azerbaijan where we had safety cars everywhere and spin-offs, and now we had a race where it was just pure racing. We got to appreciate racing itself without being distracted by spin-offs here, punctures there. Maybe at the beginning of the race there were, I think, 2 punctures, but we weren't really distracted by all the other details that come with Formula One racing, and we're able to really appreciate racing Formula One cars in its purest form, and I really appreciated that. And I'm going to highlight more of it in our race review.
Yeah, you touched on a very good point. I feel like wheel-to-wheel racing is something that we didn't get a lot of this year. And who knew that France and Spain would be entertaining races this year?
Yeah.
But with that being said, we're going to go straight into it. And we're going to talk, as we do for the rest of our race reviews, about the most entertaining moment, the best overtake, the most dramatic moment, and the most surprising moment. So, Jordan, start us off. What is your most entertaining moment?
Well, my most entertaining, I guess we're doing the last for first, because my most entertaining moment comes in the last lap of the race. And to me, this is, it's a very, it's something that I've been talking about a lot on the JJF1 podcast, and that's been Valtteri Bottas's potential resurgence. And I think today might have been the start of that, because for me, the most entertaining moment was watching Sergio Perez try again to catch up to Valtteri Bottas, but not able to do so. And I think there was only a couple of seconds that separated them when Bottas crossed the finish line with the black and white flag. And I think I think it's just like the little spark that Bottas needed. Even in his post-race interview, he said that he hasn't been on the podium in a long time and that he's very happy to be back. So he's at the moment now where he's grateful to be on the podium. And I think that's just sparking something that's going to make him consistently be on the podium again. And I'm really happy that he was able to fend off the fast Red Bull car, that has clearly more pace than Mercedes. But who knows if it's Red Bull or Max Verstappen. And that for me was my most entertaining moment. Jonah, take it away.
Very, very good pick. But I have a follow-up question. You know what? I came into this race saying that Valtteri was going to win. I don't know what I was thinking, but I feel like his official start of resurgence would probably be a win. So I want to hear more of this, of where does Bottas go from here? Because we've seen some pretty mediocre results from Mercedes. Yeah, he's in third because whenever he's finished on the podium, he's finished in third. But what's next for Valtteri Bottas?
Well, we keep forgetting that it's been a while. I mean, in Mercedes terms, it's been a while since Bottas was on the podium. It's been since Spain. There have been, I think, 4 races since then. There was Monaco, Azerbaijan, and France. So there have been 3 races since then where he has not been on the podium. But it's not that he just has not been on the podium. He has been DNF because of the longest pit stop ever. All right. And Azerbaijan was not his weekend at all. And then in France, he was overtaken by Perez at the end of the race. And I think that those 3 events are like gut-wrenching, and I think that this is because it's just a 3rd place. I think that the events that took him out of the podium places to begin with are gut-wrenching things that really, it's hard to put into words when you're put down so badly and when you're just given a little hope, how much that could do for you. And I think that's exactly what's going to do for him, because he's a man that's all about confidence.
You know what? I want you to be right just so that you could tell me that you've been right this entire time.
I really think that we're staying in Styria next weekend, and he won in Styria last year. I would not be surprised if he's in second or maybe first next weekend. I think that the grid penalty this week, was something that should not have happened, clearly, because it happened in the pit lane. But had that grid penalty not happened, we might have been talking about a Bottas starting from third and moving up his way into the further up the podium places.
Very, very wishful thinking. Honestly, I feel like if Valtteri won before Lewis did, it would be. I think Lewis would lose his mind because he's been like, there's this whole thing about the chassis change last week, and now we have this situation where Bottas is back on the podium. Who knows what could happen next? Imagine if Valtteri wins next week in Austria and Lewis Hamilton doesn't, and the next Mercedes win will be Bottas and not Hamilton. Who knows?
And I don't mean to be this guy, but for Bottas, my friend, time is ticking. You got only a couple more races before the summer break to prove to Toto Wolff that you deserve that seat for next year. So I think that if Bottas wants that seat for next year, he's going to have to win at least one race, if not two. And so that's why I think that he's now under a time pressure that I'm sure he's aware of.
TikTok, Valtteri Bottas.
Yes. Jonah.
For me, my most entertaining moment was watching the gaps between the drivers in 6th to 11th. I don't know how many I think it was like Leclerc, Sainz, Tsunoda, Stroll, everyone. All I saw was 0.7, 0.6, 1.0, and then a 0.6 and a 0.7 for the majority of the race. And you talked a lot about racing, and that is exactly what we got in the midfield. It's probably hasn't been that close this season ever. So to see 5 positions being determined by 5 seconds is something that I really enjoyed, especially since Lance was tangled in the middle of it. I'm going to get to that a little bit later, but I think that if we can't get that kind of close racing at the top without major tire strategy, I'm happy to see it in the midfield. And I mean, we see it in the top 4, like at the beginning of the race, but not so much. In the midfield, it was basically like almost the half of the race. So for me, that was my most entertaining moment, seeing the gaps in the midfield and seeing everything swap around. I really enjoyed it.
Yeah, and I think you had at least one of each of the midfield teams, one driver per team in the top 10. It was very mixed. You had a Ferrari followed by a McLaren, followed by, I think, Lance, and then Ocon was very close to him. Alonso was also in the mix there.
By the way, shout out to Charles Leclerc this weekend.
Yes.
What a crazy drive from his front wing being destroyed in turn 1 to going up to 6th place, or was it 6th or 7th? 7th. It was 7th. But bravo to him on that.
Yeah.
Drive.
But speaking of the midfield, I want to cut to the most impressive overtake.
Go for it.
And for me, it would be a double overtake in the first lap by my favorite driver, by the #1 Habs fan on the Formula One grid, Lance Stroll, who's sporting the Montreal Canadiens logo on his helmet this weekend.
Yeah.
Who overtook 2 cars, not 1, 2 cars in the opening lap, not only in the opening lap, but before turn 3, I believe. And it was a fantastic opening lap. That's what really propelled him into, I believe, the top 6 for the first half of the race. And he drove really well, ended up in the points. And I think that's the main reason for it, is because he managed his tires properly, drove a consistent race after that, and had a very strong start. And I really want to highlight that for my favorite overtake, because it was great seeing him do that. It hasn't been the luckiest of years for Aston Martin, besides that Vettel second place in Baku. But Lance has had consistent like 10, 9 finishes. And I think that his top 10 finish was cemented by that. And so
I agree with you, Jordan. I think that Lance really proved himself as a driver that has talent, not only this race, but so far this season, especially with the way that he's done comeback drives from not even making it into Q2 or Q3 and then putting the car in the points. I think that part of that is that somehow if you put the hard tire on an Aston Martin car, then it's going to manage to fly like a crazy person compared to the other cars. But you also have to give Lance credit for what he did, and that was put a car that should have been in the lower end of the points up into the higher end of the points for a very long part of the race. However, for my most impressive overtake, it will be something that kind of undid Lance's work that he did throughout the race, and that was Charles Leclerc passing Lance Stroll, because they put it on camera, and I was like, okay, this is going to be wheel to wheel. It's going to be wheel to wheel. It's going to be wheel to wheel. And I saw it for like 4 turns of it being wheel to wheel, and then Charles Leclerc finally squeaking by, and I was like, you know what? I'm disappointed, but I'm happy that we got some very good wheel to wheel racing from the two. So yeah, seeing Charles pass Lance on a pretty brilliant move was for me my best overtake.
Yeah, and you could see that after Charles Leclerc passed Lance, Lance tried to get the slipstream back and tried to repass him, but was really unable to do so. And that just is a testament to how great Charles Leclerc's drive was in Styria that day. He really recovered well from I think it was last in the race at one point, because he had wing damage.
P19.
Yeah, he had wing damage, and the only better race that I've ever seen would be Sergio Perez, who drove from last to first. Yeah. That most likely won't happen at Spielberg, but Charles Leclerc did the best that he possibly could with the car that he's given.
Mm-hmm. Very, very, very well said. Now that you talked about it, I'm going to also talk about a very funny moment that I saw, which is impressive and also funny at the same time, that Pierre Gasly managed to get his AlphaTauri back to the pits on 3 wheels and a dead suspension. So I enjoyed seeing that for comedic value, because I did not expect Pierre to actually bring that car home. I thought that it was going to be a safety car, they would have to tow him out or something like that. But no, dead suspension on those white rimmed AlphaTauri tires for some reason. I don't know why they did it.
I think it's cool.
It's fine. And I don't know how he managed to get it past. It was impressive. But now we've talked about the good moments. I want to move on to the heartbreak. Because for me, my most dramatic moment was the George Russell saga. Because, oh my God, apparently him getting into the points is the kiss of death. Because he's running in 8th place. He's going to pick up his first Williams points. And then all of a sudden the pit crew is like, how about no? And that was exactly what happened with George Russell. Three pits later, he finally just said, you know what? Screw it. I'm done. And they pulled him into the garage. And at that point, I felt really, really bad for him, because he drove well up until that point. And he's gotten so close a few times this year already. and a few times again last year, and it just hasn't worked out. So that was my most dramatic moment, was seeing George Russell getting caught up in the pits for like, I think one of the stops was like 26 seconds or something like that. Craziness. But yeah, I felt bad for George Russell at that point. That was my most dramatic moment.
Yeah. Look, George Russell and the points are really not good friends. They really don't like each other.
It's the opposite of the handshake meme. You know, like the Arnold Schwarzenegger meme where it's like two hands on. Yeah, it's the opposite of that.
They're not good friends. They really don't like each other. And I was so excited when he was running in 8th place, because not only did he start from 10th, but he also had a free tire choice because of Yuki Tsunoda's grid penalty. Yuki Tsunoda blocked Valtteri in qualifying, so he didn't move out of the way properly and was given a 3-place grid penalty, which we'll get to qualifying in a second, which gave George 10th place to start from with a free tire choice. So I knew I was hoping that Williams was going to come out with a great tire strategy, but they didn't need to, because coming out of the gates, George overtook also on the first lap, I believe. And he was driving incredibly. The Williams car could have been a Haas, and he would have been driving really well. I don't know if I'd go that far, but you get my point. Yeah, very impressive and gut wrenching when I'm seeing that pit stop and I'm like, go George, go. And I saw something that happened with the tire. I think it was something with the side pods that really didn't groove. I didn't really understand what happened, but it was just so unfortunate that it wasn't even something with the tire. It wasn't even the longest pit stop ever. It was really sad. And I'm really happy you touched on George Russell, because that leads me to my most dramatic moment. And my most dramatic moment happened in qualifying when George Russell was 0.008 of a second from going into Q3.
So I don't think we realize how close that is.
No, it passed already. It's crazy. And George Russell and the points are not friends. George Russell and Q3 are even worse friends, because I think it was also in Imola where he started, maybe it was 11th, I'm not sure, but he was also incredibly close to getting Q3. I know it was in the thousands that he was off from Q3. It's crazy how well George can push that car to the limit. And it's really just a work of art seeing him drive a car that has no place starting in 10th, let alone 11th.
That car should not be getting points. And it hasn't gotten points, but it's been really, really close. So, yeah, I agree with you. Just George Russell's such an amazing driver. And I'm really happy that you touched on that the car should not be anything close to the points, because that leads me to my most surprising moment. And Jordan, this is probably going to be a very big stretch of what I'm using for my surprising moment, because I wrote in my notes, I'm going to call this the duality of drivers.
Okay.
I'm going to talk about how different teams, most notably 3 of them, had one driver that was an absolute maniac this weekend, and one that completely missed an opportunity to do something.
Can I guess them?
You could guess. Go for it.
So I know the first one is going to be Williams, because George had no business being running in the points.
It's going to be
Latifi was like stuck with the Haas half the time.
So Williams and Latifi is one of them.
I'm going to say the second one is McLaren.
That is correct. McLaren and Daniel Ricciardo, an absolutely failed opportunity when Lando Norris was in 5th place. Come on.
Ricciardo.
How do you manage to have 2 cars? One of them is fighting with Sergio Perez and Valtteri Bottas in front of you, and Charles Leclerc behind you. And then you have Daniel Ricciardo in 13th place trying to fight with, I don't know, Antonio Giovinazzi. Like,
yeah. and we spoke about this last week, how Daniel Ricciardo, he performed well at the French Grand Prix. We thought that he would continue this, but it looks like the learning curve on that McLaren is really, really tough. And like I said in our driver rankings episode, that's what happens when you go from one team to the other to the other. You go to Red Bull, 2 years at Renault, 2 years, not a long time. For another, to then leave to go to McLaren, it's very hard to get accustomed to these new cars, new teams every time you switch.
Mhm.
And unfortunately, we're seeing that catch up to Daniel Ricciardo.
Yeah, so 100%, you got that right. Now, time for you to guess my third one.
I'm going to say, and I'm going to be really proud of myself if I get this, I'm going to say Alfa Romeo.
No, that is not correct.
Okay, well then I'll get to Alfa Romeo in a second, but you tell me.
My third team that I want to talk about is Alpine and Esteban Ocon. I'm sorry, Jordan, to deal with it. Esteban Ocon was in 14th place today. For Alpine, that's unacceptable. I mean, yeah, they're at the end of the midfield, but I figured that with the way that the Aston Martins are doing and the way that the Alpha Tauris are doing, and even the way that the Alfa Romeos are doing, you would at least see both drivers in around the points. So like probably the 8th to 12th area. And Alonso ended up doing that this weekend, and Esteban Ocon did not. Apparently, he signed his contract and he was like, yeah, I'm just going to stop putting in the effort and chill in 14th place with my 3-year extension. Merci, bonsoir.
Yeah, I was going to touch on that. His contract did not do him any favors in terms of performance, because even at the French Grand Prix, in his home country with the home team, the home driver didn't do that well. And it was kind of a repeat this week in Spielberg, where he was running in 14th. He was knocked out in Q3, again, where that car should not be getting knocked out in.
Yeah.
I'm very, and I unfortunately don't have an answer, because he's normally a good driver. He's normally running in the points. I mean, with this Alpine car, it's been hard for the drivers to get accustomed to it. They got their first points in Imola, haven't gotten many since. But yeah, he's not normally a good driver. He had a second place finish last year in Bahrain. So
in roughly the same car, right?
Yeah.
I mean, it was branded as a Renault, but it's still, this year's Alpine car is a near replica, with the exception of certain changes, of last year's Renault car. And
right, but that argument could also be invalidated by the fact that Racing Point had a fantastic car in 2020 and Aston Martin has not shown up to the same level.
Yeah, but with the ability, well, yeah, but I would say that Lance Stroll is doing better than Esteban Ocon this year.
Right, I completely agree.
Because
I think
that is where in a car that has a lot less potential than last year, Lance has shown that he could push the limits of that car, and I think that it hasn't been the case with Esteban this year.
But we can debate this in another podcast. I do think, though, that the management at Aston Martin is astronomically better than the management at Alpine. And I think that is one of the biggest factors in the fact that Aston Martin is ahead of Alpine.
It's partial, but I mean, we also don't know what's going on with their development plans, because let's be real, there are a few teams that are not even bothering for this year with their cars. Like, even Haas said, listen, this is your car. You're not getting any more upgrades. This is going to be your car for the entire year. Deal with it. We're focusing on next year, because next year is one of the biggest technical regulation changes ever. So who knows what could happen? I mean, next year could be a coin flip of what's going to happen, because the regulations are so different.
Maybe Haas wins the championship.
Yeah, if Haas wins the championship, I don't know what I'd do because that is very improbable. Almost as improbable as the Montreal Canadiens making it to the Stanley Cup final for the first time since
Yes.
1993. Gotta
But
find a way to plug it in there.
yes, go Habs, go. But
Yeah.
for my surprising moment, we got a little off topic. Bring it back to the race. My surprising moment, I mentioned Alfa Romeo, was seeing Kimi Räikkönen manage his tires so well, which got him deep into the points places at one point, and had a great finish too.
Yeah, Raikkonen was running fifth at one point,
Yeah.
right? And I remember Daniel Ricciardo pitted to overtake Raikkonen. Like,
Yeah.
what?
Räikkönen?
Yeah, exactly. Box to overtake Raikkonen. And I'm like, in what world would you strategically pit a McLaren to overtake an Alfa Romeo?
But yeah, Kimi drove a hell of a race. He was really, really good. And
Yes, he did.
I think that that's attributed a lot to his tire management skills. I think he was running the hard compound for a while since the beginning of the race. I'm not entirely sure, but I think that it is just mainly attributed to his tire management skills, and that just speaks to his, his experience in Formula One and his world championship, and just the expertise that he brings to the sport. And don't be fooled. That's rubbing off on Antonio Giovinazzi, and I'm sure that's why you saw very good performances in Monaco and in the other races.
Yeah, I mean, I think that Alfa Romeo has been underrated this year. We don't talk a lot about Alfa Romeo, but I think that they've done a solid job so far with the equipment that they have, with the drivers that they have. I mean, I like Kimi Räikkönen. I think that he's burnt out. You think that Giovinazzi doesn't have a great future in F1.
Look,
with the situation that they're in, they're doing well.
Yeah, but look, as the season goes along, we might have to adjust our driver rankings because Giovinazzi has been performing very well, and I can't really say anything about it because, again, a car that shouldn't be in Q3, he took it into Q3.
Yeah, exactly. So, yeah, that is where we are now. 7 days from now, we're going to be back at the Red Bull Ring for the Austrian Grand Prix, not the Styrian Grand Prix. So apparently this has become for tradition that we make some very bold predictions for the race. So Jordan, what are your bold predictions for the Austrian Grand Prix?
Well, it's not a prediction for the race. It's a prediction for qualifying. And I think I texted this to Jonah earlier in the weekend, but George Russell will make his first appearance into Q3. And I am...
Well, not in his career. His first time with Williams.
With Williams, yes. He did it with Mercedes at the Sakir Grand Prix. I really think that he'll do it. I think he'll find that 8,000s of like that. Those 8,000s, I think he will find it. In terms of the race win, I said Charles Leclerc would be on the podium this week. I was wrong.
I believed you. I put money on Charles Leclerc being on the podium. Lost.
Well, if you want to believe me again, I would put money myself on this. I'd put money on Lando Norris coming in either first or second place. I'm not saying third. He's going to come in first or second place.
You know what? I wanna jump on that bandwagon because this week I made a bet for McLaren winning the race. Either of the McLaren drivers, the multiplier was 29. So at that point I said, if I even put 50 cents, I'll make loads of money. So, yeah, so I'm going to stick to my gut, stick to your gut on that and say that one of the McLaren drivers is going to win the race. More likely Lando Norris, but who knows?
What are the odds on Ricciardo getting into the points? Because
Ricciardo getting into the points. I mean, look, as soon as the betting odds come out, I will text you what the betting odds are. But I will definitely let you know. But it's very possible that McLaren could get their first win since 2012 in 7 days' time.
Well, we'll see, and we'll be right back for that race review.
Yes. So if you want to hear more, don't forget to like our Facebook page, follow us on Instagram at the JJF1 podcast, and we will see you for the next episode. See ya.
See ya.